I caught Karen's son in my living room at midnight holding my kid's game console like it belonged to him, and when I grabbed his arm, he just smirked and said, "My mom runs the HOA, I can go wherever I want." Minutes later, the cops had him in cuffs, but instead of relief, I felt this cold certainty. It wasn't over. It was just the opening shot of something much bigger. And let me tell you, if you think HOA drama is about lawns and mailboxes, you haven't seen what I saw. That night started with the faintest creak, a sound that snapped me out of sleep like a slap. I crept down the stairs barefoot, no weapon in my hand, just the thought of protecting my wife and my son. The blue glow of a phone screen moved around my living room, and there he was, Kyle Carson, 14 hoodie up, standing in my house like it was his playground. When I demanded an answer, he spat back, "My mom runs this street. She can log every violation you've ever made." I tightened my grip and told him, "Notes don't open doors, kid." Upstairs, Tina's voice called out, steady, calm, already dialing 911. When those red and blue lights filled the windows and the officers took him away, Kyle's bravado finally cracked and he cried like the kid he was. But in my gut, I knew his tears weren't the end. Morning proved me right. Max, my son, came home from school with dirt on his face, his jacket ripped. At the bus stop, Kyle and his buddies had cornered him, shoved him, called him a snitch, and promised that his mom would make us move. Tina pulled out her phone and scrolled through the messages they'd been sending Max all day. Threats, insults, promises of revenge. She saved every word, backed them up to a folder we labeled Evidence Carson. And as much as it made my blood boil, part of me wondered if fighting back would only make things worse. Would I be dragging my whole family into a battle we couldn't win? That's when Karen herself showed up. She marched to my front door in a sharp navy pantsuit, clipboard in hand, smiling that cold smile that never touched her eyes. She didn't mention her son breaking into my house, didn't mention the police, didn't mention the threats to my kid. No, she tapped her papers and said, "Your grass is 3¼ inches high. That's a violation." She fined me $1,700 for grass for trash cans being visible 3 minutes too long and for installing a porch light after her son's break-in. Then she leaned close and hissed, "Pay, or life gets busy around here." Tina had her phone recording the whole thing. I just smiled, thanked her for the papers, and closed the door. That confused look on her face. That was the first time I knew I had a chance. Still that night, staring at those papers, I doubted myself. Was I really going to war with the HOA president? Should I just pay, let it slide, protect my family the easy way? But then I looked at Max sitting quiet in his room, scared to walk down his own street, and I thought, no, I won't let them win by fear. So Tina and I pulled out the HOA rules, every dusty page, and what we found was gold. The 3-inch grass rule didn't exist. The trash can deadline changed to 8 a.m. years ago. The porch light list, never written. Karen was fabricating fines out of thin air. And worse, her security company was a shell set up by her brother-in-law, a man with a record for assault. She was running the HOA like her personal mafia. But evidence matters more than outrage, so I set a trap. I prepared a fake letter from a law firm, sealed it with invisible UV paint, and planted it in my mailbox. Then I hid a wildlife camera in the bushes. Hours later, Kyle came slinking by. The footage caught him lowering the flag, pulling out the mail, pocketing the fake letter, then slipping it back minutes later. Under a black light, the seal glowed green with a smeared fingerprint. Federal crime tampering with the U.S. mail. Now I had more than complaints. I had dynamite. I took it all to Detective Miller at the police bureau. He listened page by page, video by video, and finally leaned back and said, "This isn't HOA drama anymore. This is criminal enterprise." He told me to wait to stall because Karen would escalate. And he was right. 2 nights later, a white van rolled up outside my house. 2 men in black polos with a cheap Maple Rest security logo came pounding on my door. One of them was Frank Carson, Karen's brother-in-law. They shouted about a mandatory nighttime inspection, flashing lights into my windows, rattling my gate. My wife streamed the Ring camera directly to Detective Miller. I told the men loud and clear, "There's no such thing as a mandatory inspection. You're trespassing. Leave." Frank shoved at my door, his hand slamming into my shoulder. Assault caught on camera. And that was the moment the sirens roared. Police cars boxed them in red and blue lights exploding across our cul-de-sac. Miller stepped out calm as a stone and showed Frank the live video feed of his shove. Frank's face drained of color. He knew he was done. They cuffed him right there. Karen stormed out in her robe, screaming, "I'm the HOA president. You can't do this." But then CPS walked up with a briefcase ready to question her about her son. And when the cops brought Kyle out in cuffs for mail tampering, Karen's shriek broke into something between a sob and a growl. Her kingdom was collapsing in front of every neighbor on the block. But it wasn't finished. 2 days later, the HOA meeting was packed tighter than ever. Karen sat at the center dressed sharp, trying to act like nothing had happened. I walked to the front with Tina at my side, hooked up our laptop, and said, "We've been told the HOA protects property values. But what is the value of a home where you live in fear?" Then I played the footage. Kyle breaking into my house. Kyle shoving Max at the bus stop. Kyle stealing mail. Frank pounding on my door. The room gasped, muttered, then erupted. One by one, neighbors stood an elderly woman fined $2,000 because her husband's wheelchair ramp wasn't the right shade of brown, a father nearly losing his home over a basketball hoop. Story after story poured out. The dam had broken. Karen pounded her gavel, shouting, "This meeting is adjourned." But no one was listening. The board voted to remove her, froze the accounts, and called in forensic accountants. And what they uncovered was worse than any of us imagined. Shell companies funneling thousands every month to her relatives, fake landscaping bills, bogus pool repairs, even a consulting fee to herself. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, the works. The district attorney pressed charges, the IRS joined in, and in court the judge dismissed all her bogus liens, forced her to pay our legal fees, and called her abuse of power despicable. And just like that, the Queen of Maple Rest Court fell. Her son in juvenile detention, her brother-in-law facing charges, her empire exposed as a racket. She walked into that courtroom thinking she owned the neighborhood, and she walked out stripped of everything. So here's what I learned: bullies thrive on fear and silence. But when you stand firm, build the evidence, and refuse to be intimidated, they fall. Always. Would you have fought back against someone like Karen? Or would you have paid and stayed quiet?